things off, Jeff, tell us how you met your wife, how long you've been married, just a little bit about that part of your life.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you so much for inviting me to join you, Dr.
Sure.
Kim. This is so fun. Love everything you're doing with Awesome Marriage and your ministry. So yeah, my wife and I, we met each other 18 years ago. And I actually was returning from class. I was at college up here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, returning from class, and she was in my living room waiting for me. That's how I met my wife. And the reason is she went to high school with a few of my roommates. So she was a freshman. I was a junior. She was new in school and was just saying hello to some of my roommates. And I was like, who is that girl after I met her? And pursued her. And it started dating about a year later. And we've been married now for 13 and a half years.
That's what a cool way to meet. It's kind of like God just dropped her in there, right? And you just
absolutely.
Okay, I mean, God, thank you.
Yes,
that is really good. Well, you and I've talked before. Dad Awesome is a great podcast, and we're going to encourage people to listen to that and all the wisdom you bring to that. And your passion for fatherhood is a lot like mine in the fact that I know the difference that the more guys follow God, the more they become who God created them to be as fathers, the better the home are, the better the world is. So how did you get started with that? Your passion, encouraging men to be great fathers. What was the launch pad?
Yeah, great questions. This goes back like 2.5 years ago. I was on the patio of a friend's house in Arizona, and he's asking me this question about, he's like, how are you being an intentional dad? What keeps you intentional? How are you learning and growing? And actually his question led to me realizing that I was not being an intentional dad from the standpoint of growth. I was approaching leadership and ministry and personal growth and fitness. I was approaching some other areas with a learning mindset of I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to grow. But actually fatherhood was something that I was just plodding along. I think I was a good dad, but I wasn't intentionally growing mentorship. I wasn't seeking mentorship in the area of fatherhood. So I actually realized it was an area I was not attending to with intentionality. And so that was part of the kind of birth of this passion. The other part, though, the other half is actually pain. And I have actually seen this in a bunch of areas of my life, that it was pain that led to a deep passion. And the pain actually comes from two places. It was from my own dad. So things growing up with just some wounds, some hurts, some baggage in my own life caused me to not want to do that to my girls, my little girls. And then also some of my friends, a couple of friends that walked away from their marriage, and I see their kids with a dad and mom who are no longer together, no longer married, splitting time in homes, and the deep pain. I see that as a kids pastor. I see that pain all the time. And really, I think that's what God has used to keep this passion going. We're close to 2.5 years into this journey of Dad Awesome. It's probably more the pain side that fuels the passion for Dad Awesome and helping dads, helping myself stay intentional and present, but also helping so many other dads. It's just like that. I don't want to see these kids in pain.
Isn't it amazing how God takes our pain and we give it to him and he turns it around and then uses it like he's using you to help other dads. And that's, it's just so cool.
Yeah, it's huge. And one other quick story on that, as far as the pain journey, and I'm so grateful. After I hit publish on episode number 1 of Dad Awesome, the next morning, my dad was rushed to the hospital with brain cancer and lung cancer. And so the parallel journey of growing this fatherhood ministry was actually parallel to a healing journey with my dad and I. And he was my greatest fan, my greatest encourager. He was praying for the ministry as it grew. And we actually walked through a healing process it was 100 weeks. So basically he went home to be with Jesus on episode 100 of Dad Awesome.
Wow.
And so this was, about 6 months ago now at the time this will air. And so the gift, actually pain turned into deep healing in the birth of this ministry, which is, I just so thankful to God for.
That is such an incredible story. And just that you and your dad had that chance to reconcile and grow your relationship late in his life like that. It's
grateful.
Really cool.
Yeah, very grateful.
I think as a dad, and I certainly went through that when my kids were young, I feel more equipped as a granddad than I did as a dad. Maybe I don't feel the pressure I did then, but I think a lot of guys go through that. We don't feel like we're really equipped to be a good dad. So just in general for the guys listening, what makes a good dad? And if you're going to give them a starting point, what would that be?
Oh man, it's such a huge question, such a great question. And I actually think part of it is just a realization of the importance of our role.
Mm,
If we're like, hey, I'm trying to survive this day to the next day to the next week, new challenges all the time. As soon as we start to feel like we've figured out dad life, we realize, oh no, dad life has shifted to a new season and
you're
we're
right.
back to starting point, right? So just the realization of the impact of our role is probably the starting point that I would encourage any dad. And it's for me, it comes straight from a promise found in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. Many people have heard this, but it says, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. So now choose life so that you and your children may live. And this goes back to, the pain that I talked about a moment ago, but we get a choice as dads to choose life, to be a
Yeah.
life-giving dad. And I even use the play on words of we're adding life to the dad life, right? Like
Hmm.
we can choose to show up and be life-giving to our kids. We can choose a bigger perspective because our kids and our grandkids and our great they're all impacted with this promise. So by our choice, we actually, the trickle down effect, the blessing flows down. And so that is the big picture. I would say to that question is just simply know that your role, it matters more than you know. And if your kids could take a time machine back, they would tell you right now, all the dads listening, that your kids would say, thank you for, when I was 2, thank you for when I was 6, saying, I'm going to do my best. I'm not gonna pretend to be an awesome dad or a perfect dad, or I'm just gonna show up and
Yeah.
bring life to my kids. So perspective is probably the biggest thing that I would contribute there. Of just like the role is bigger than you know and more impactful, and your kids will thank you forever by just being that dad that says, I'm gonna bring life.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, I think where I really saw that in my son is when he became a dad, and all of a sudden he was thanking me for things that he hadn't really thought about in that
Yes.
way until all of a sudden he was a dad and he was saying, so he felt like he had a pretty good role model. I made a lot of mistakes too. And that's what I told him. I said, yeah, take forward the good things that you think I did and leave those bad things behind, learn from my mistakes. And I think he's done a lot of that as I see him raising his sons right now. And so, yeah, I think it is. And the thanks is there. Sometimes it comes a little bit later, but I think it's just day after day, knowing you are doing an important work and God will equip you to do that.
Yeah, and the next day you get the chance again to do it again, because I can be the first one to say, I run this ministry called DadAWESOME, but I'll be the first one to say, like, just last night my patience level was way, way, way lower than it should have been with my sweet little girls. Like,
Yeah.
my distraction level was I drawn to my phone versus being present and on the floor with my girls? Yeah, last night I made that choice. And did that bring life to my girls? Did their eyes shine because daddy was home? Nope, not in that moment. I actually chose a passive approach. But that's how good our God is that he gives us the next day to press in and choose life. It's a
Absolutely.
daily choice versus it's not a scorecard that gets added up and you have to like weigh it. No, it's actually, no matter what happened the last decade, we're good to go. We can choose life today. So
Yeah, I think that's so important for guys to hear, because I know how many times I felt like I blew it. I think every dad feels that at one time. But you're right. Next day is a do-over. And kids,
right.
what I've seen kids are really resilient. And if they know that we're trying and we're working hard and they see that effort, they're very grace-oriented as far as the mistakes that we make as dads, I think.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the same thing. And the apology goes a
Yeah.
long ways. I think seeing the look in
Oh,
my little girl's eyes when I apologize. Here's a quick story. We went sledding 2 days ago. So, it's winter here in Minnesota when we're recording this, but we were sledding and my daughter's eating this dirty snow. And I'm like, I look at her and I'm like, hey, you can't eat that snow. And if you keep eating that snow, I'm going to throw a handful of snow in your face. And this is my little sweet girl.
yeah.
And I followed through on my promise. And I thought it seemed like a good consequence at the time. I grabbed a handful of snow, and it was a bigger handful than I want it to be. And it got her right in the eyes. And her look of daddy, like the fear that entered her, because I did this. I'm the big adult in her life that should
Yeah.
keep her safe. And I just wrapped her up, and we actually processed the rest of the day. We kept going back to that same moment of being like, I made a mistake. Dad threw too much snow. I didn't mean to hit you in the eyes. I missed. And I was just holding her, but it actually caused her heart to soften and me to be closer to her because I owned my mess up. And I feel like half of my dad life is actually not bringing life and then realizing it, apologizing, and now her realizing that I'm a dad that's with her and loves her heart and wants to reconnect and apologize. So grateful for that.
That's so good because we all make mistakes. I can think of so many times that I thought that's a really good idea, and after I do it, it's like that was the dumbest thing you could have
Yes.
done at that time.
Yes.
But I think it does. It gives us those opportunities. And what you said, the story would have been totally different if you would have just walked away and said, "Suck it up," you know.
Yeah.
But you didn't. You used that as a chance to say, "I made a mistake," and to love her, embrace her, and she can. I think it's important for our kids, and whenever that is, to know that we do make mistakes, that we are not perfect as dads. But that's okay because we've got a God that's perfect and that's who we're following. And he's going to equip us to be the dads we need to be.
Right. And my own father, his example of, I mean, really 60 years of his life. So until he was about 60, he passed away just, 6 months ago here, he was 67. But like overall, he was a quiet faith and not a lot of specific intentionality around guiding me to God. Like my mom was the spiritual leader of our home until those last years. But what I saw is even a dad who he was present, he stayed and he loved my mom, he stayed, but he was not an active, intentional leader in the area of like guiding our kids' hearts towards Jesus and develop it. He was just a quiet leader. But what I saw is the impact of his life in just a few years of intentionality at the end has a massive impact on all of us kids. So what if dads earlier, and this is why I love that this is on Father's Day, I get to encourage, like we have the chance today to choose life. We don't have to wait till a later season. In fact, almost everyone that I interview on my podcast, they look back if they're in the season of in their 60s, 70s, or a grandparent now, they look back and they're like, man, I wish I would have invested more there. Like it's like the unanimous feedback is, I wish I would have turned the dial. I wish I would have invested more in connecting with the hearts of my kids in that season.
Yeah, and because I think, people tell us when our kids are growing up how quick it goes, but it does go quick, and we don't want to miss those opportunities. And I think if anybody gets anything out of what we're talking about today, don't miss those opportunities. If you don't feel like you've been as intentional with the time with your kids, that is something you'll never regret. You're not going to get at the end of your life and say, man, I spent too much time with my kids. That will never, ever happen. It's just not going to do it. No, not at all. So what about this generation of dads that we have now? What is encouraging to you about them, and what do you see these guys doing right?
Yeah, I do see this, that there is a general peer pressure in the area of being a present dad, being with your kids. Like I think our generation does celebrate intentional dads that play with their kids. So yes. I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I think there's the layer of social media can be good and bad in that area. It's good because it's like you see a picture of your friends wrestling with their kids and it might inspire you to get on the floor and wrestle with your kids. So it's good, but there's also a little bit, I think, of posturing of we're just sharing those moments, those highlight moments. And again, technology is pulling us away, our eyes away from our kids to a glowing screen. So that's the downside of it. But in general, I think this generation, it's encouraged that the dad is just as active, just as present, versus I think my parents' generation, it was pretty accepted that mom was the present, intentional figure. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. I think we are getting that right. Another thing that I love about the generation right now, dads like myself with young kids, is I think that when invited into a bigger mission, a bigger purpose, a bigger calling, I think these dads are saying yes. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And quick example of this, and it's fun because of Father's Day. So this year, Father's Day, we're rallying for the second year in a row, dads to ride their bikes 100 miles on behalf of the fatherless. So it's saying, let's take Father's Day weekend and let's turn it into a cause bigger than ourselves. Instead of a consuming weekend of I'm going to consume some barbecue or pizza and watch a football game, it's saying let's actually activate dads on Father's Day weekend to do something hard on behalf of kids without dads. And what I've seen is the percentage of dads that have opted in and said yes, like this year, 100 dads raising $100,000 for these partner ministries that serve the fatherless. It's and actually the cool thing about this is a lot of dads wouldn't say, I need to get in a small group with other dads, or I need to find a deeper friendship, or I need to help myself be a better dad. A lot of dads actually won't self-identify a need to increase in this area, but a lot of dads might say, I could use some more exercise and I'd love to help kids without dads. Like that's an easy one to opt into. But the benefit of going and doing that hard bike ride is next thing you know, because we're on mission together, deeper friendships are forming and deeper brotherhoods forming. And these dads go home and are way more intentional dads back with their own families because they've been exposed to some of the social ills around the fatherless and this just epidemic that exists around the world. So I share that a story to celebrate because it's Father's Day, the ride in the Fathers for the Fatherless initiative. But more to say, I think dads are ready and poised, and they want a bigger passion to chase after. I can even use myself as an example. 2.5 years ago, would I have said I have 10 extra hours a week to invest in building a ministry, aside from the core responsibilities of my job? Like,
Sure.
where am I going to find 10 hours with 3 little girls? There's no way I have 10 extra hours a week of time. But because of deep passion that's fueled by pain that I mentioned earlier, I actually have that time. And I think if we can ignite fathers around a bigger purpose and calling, and part of it's for their own kids at home, but even bigger, I think our kids see that and they can't wait, and they pray. I think if kids could pray prayers for themselves when they're younger, they would pray that their dads' hearts are ignited around a bigger passion and vision than themselves.
No, I think that's so good. I love that idea of the bike ride. What a cool thing if that would, something like that would catch on. It doesn't have to be a bike ride, but something where I think anytime we get in touch with like the fatherless or something that we make an impact, especially where it's kids. It does something for us. And I think I love it that guys doing this together because it does bond you together. And then I think we're better dads. Exactly what you said. You go home, when I've been in situations where I've seen some things with kids and parents and come home and just value my kids and just think, man, I want to spend more time with them. I want to invest more in them. And it pays off. I think one of the things I say a lot is, all the time raising our kids, Nancy and I wanted to be friends with them when they were adults. And so with that end goal, we tried to limit the things that would take that get in the way of that goal. And so I think that's what we all want. We don't want our kids to leave home. Well, maybe sometimes we think that, leave home and never come back, but those are just those short-lived times, right? But in the big picture, I want to be a part of my kids' life, their whole lives, and be part of their children's lives, and all on and on and on, things like that.
Yeah, and one verse just to jump in with, because it's such a driver, Malachi 4 verse 6, it talks about he will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. That it's actually a heart turning that is amazing to see. That, again, pain, when you realize these kids, on the Thailand-Burma border are living in an orphanage, when you learn about that story and your heart is stirred, you actually go home as a dad and your heart is turned more to the hearts of your kids. And I think that's why short-term mission trips can be so powerful. When you're exposed to great need, great suffering, it actually changes your priorities in your life. And so that's part of our prayer for that initiative, the Fathers for the Fatherless, is that we actually can ignite by exposing to the needs of, kids without dads.
Yeah, that's so cool. Another thing I thought of too, I think that in talking to wives over there is nothing that warms your wife's heart toward you that when she sees you being a good dad, interacting with your kids. It just does. And so I've had guys said, I love the time I'm spending with my kids, and my relationship with my wife is better. Our physical relationship is better. This has got benefits all over the place, Yes. So it is. And so I think our wives love to see us do that. And I think you're right. There was a generation, probably my parents' generation and probably some of yours, that the dad wasn't quite as involved as we have the opportunities to be now, and dads have the opportunity to be now, just because of what culture told people back then. And I think we've kind of debunked some of those negative things to where we can be more involved, and we are more involved now.
Yeah, I love that. And one area that I think maybe causes us to withdraw is, and I alluded to it earlier, is pain from our own childhood. I think that we all carry a level of baggage forward because of things that we experienced, and either we saw our dad was removed or our dad, caused some hurt. So we're like, I think there is some level of fearfulness that, man, I'm not a perfect dad. I can't step into that place. What if I connect with their hearts and hurt their hearts, or I'm not able to follow through? And I think that's an area that God wants all of us to completely trust him in, is knowing that, hey, we can actually throw off the sin that entangles and the things that hold us back, the Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 stuff, right? And we can run towards the hearts of our kids. And a litmus test for me is looking at their eyes. If you look at your kids' eyes and their eyes are glowing and shiny, you know that you are chasing their hearts and connecting with their hearts. Doesn't matter what their age is. If their eyes are shiny, that means you are pressing in and saying, no, I'm going to bring life to my kids. If their eyes are a little bit looking, and hopefully it's not the kind of glazed over after watching a movie or a video game, right? Yeah. Not that kind of glazed over. It's the awe and wonder side of childhood that's what God created us to do, is experience that awe and wonder and shiny eyes. But it comes from our eyes. And if we as dads, if we're not bringing that shiny eyed, like, let's throw a dance party, let's get on the floor and wrestle. If we are reserved or hesitant or let the baggage hold us back, then our kids' eyes don't shine. So it's a good litmus test for me.
I agree. And there's nothing more rewarding to me than seeing a little kid's eyes shine. It's just so powerful. It's so cool. So we talked about the things that I think this generation is probably doing right. What's the concern that you have for this generation of dads? Are there areas they're falling short? Is there warnings you would give them?
Yeah, great question. The concerns spoken are also concerns for myself. I see this in myself. So it's not like I'm diagnosing other people's areas. It's really, right. I'm right in it. But isolation is a concern. I think we still we drift in the direction of being isolated, not having brotherhood. And again, I'm speaking just to the dads, but this applies to moms that might be listening, having sisterhood. But brotherhood is the strength that keeps the hard days from becoming permanent hard days. Like brotherhood, when I have guys and I sit at 5:30 a.m. at a Starbucks with 4 of my closest brothers every other Thursday, like these guys continue to bring my perspective back to, no, it matters. Even though I'm short-term, I'm not actually seeing any of the short-term parenting. Dad life does not see any short-term gains. With physical fitness, with work and investment strategies, with side hustles, with your career, all these other house projects, you have short-term, you can see it. We have deferred outcomes when it comes to parenting. We invest now, but we don't see it for years and years to come. So brotherhood, in my mind, isolation is on the attack. Isolation is going to try to keep us from God's best in the area of being a life-giving dad. And brotherhood, to me, who's the guy I can call at 1 a.m. because I had a fight with my wife? Who's the guy that I can call on the way to the hospital with my daughter who's cut her chin wide open and I need someone to pray for me? Who's the guy? To me, it's all about, if you don't have that person you can call when things are not going well, and when you need someone to get on their knees. And actually, so my buddies, they'll actually tell me, I am right now getting on my knees and praying for you. Like that to me, and I experienced losing my dad. My dad, I don't like to say losing my dad. My dad heading off to heaven before me. That loss of him being here, the level of prayer and support and encouragement, these guys driving over, bringing meals to my wife, brotherhood is everything to keep us on the trajectory of God's best for our life. So I would say that is an area of concern I have for dads, is the level of isolation, that the busyness, the pace of life right now, it's not setting us up well for deep brotherhood. So that's one. And then the other one is pace. I think God's just doing a work in my life around Sabbath. I have not honored God with my Sabbath. If you look at the last decade of my life, this is a serious area that I am pressing into, saying, God, I want to honor you by taking a day of rest. And it's not, with little kids, it's not fully rest, but it's a day away from the rat race, the hyper, I've got to consume, or hyper, I've got to produce. And it's saying, I trust you, God. I trust you with this day. Yeah. And so pace, I think, is sucking the life out of the dad life. And so that's another just concern area that I would say, as I've interviewed, again, close to 100 guests on Dad Awesome, I'm seeing themes. I already mentioned baggage is definitely an area of concern, but we already talked about that. And those are a few.
No, I think those are really real. I love I'm gonna go back to brotherhood just a minute, because I think the things you said and the importance of it are so good. But I also have guys, and I've talked to guys about this in counseling, or even a lot of times with their wives there, and the wives are nodding, they're encouraging that. And the guy looks at me and says, I don't know where to find that guy. Where do you find him?
Yeah, so I love that question, because just asking the question reveals it is a desire. Starts with a desire. So ask the question. And then, and I've been in my same church. I'm a children's pastor up at Substance Church in Minnesota. And this is the heartbeat of our church, is helping people find brotherhood if you're a guy. And the heartbeat here is there are so many ways to find it, but a few. I mean, I mentioned the bike ride. joining other dads on a mission. So you find, hey, we go to the same church and we're going on a bike ride. So we want to fitness and we're dads. You got 3 common factors that might turn into a deep brotherhood. So serving others is another area. I'm like, man, if you volunteer consistently in one place, you're going to rub shoulders with people who care about that same cause and who love the Lord and maybe, you know, in that case are in the same season of life. So these are ways you rub shoulders, but it comes down to intentionality. And my favorite tip to find brotherhood, I call it the peer mentor approach, where you ask a guy who you see something you respect in their life. You see someone, man, I respect this about you or that. It could be your discipline with fitness or your career or your marriage or your dad life. Like, you know, people, every dad listening right now knows somebody that they respect something about their life. It doesn't have to be all areas of their life. They respect something. Asking them for 45 minutes of their time to grab a coffee or to go for a jog together or to meet up in the lobby of church or to let's meet at a park while our kids play. Asking for a one time and relating it to something you want to learn from them. Now, all of a sudden, instead of them being defensive of, oh, this guy wants to be my deep, closest friend. Now, all they're thinking is, man, that's cool. That person, he wants to learn from me. So I call it the peer mentor approach. Then a month later, so take some notes, go do the things you learned, ask them, hey, can we meet up again? I'd love to learn more from you. But it happens to be that peer mentor is flipping into, you're basically trying out a deeper friendship. And then all of a sudden you find chemistry and you find yourself as close friends. So by approaching a friendship from a peer mentor framework, it takes all the weirdness away because you're not asking for a long-term, let's be in an accountability group together. You're not asking for that. You're asking for a 45-minute meetup to learn and grow. And next thing you know, you're getting to know each other's lives and you're praying for that person and you're closer, your brotherhood's there. And next thing you know, you're taking road trips to put in the docks at your parents' place in northern Wisconsin. And that's kind of how the progression works for my closest friends. So, yep.
Yeah, and I think that's so good because I don't want somebody to listen to this and think, oh my gosh, and be scared because I don't know if I want to sit around and pray with a bunch of guys, right off the bat. And so I think you're right. Looking around, finding the people there that, like you said, you had the 3 commonalities there, that somebody's got something in common with you. And maybe it's somebody, likes to play golf or tennis. And so you start hanging out with them there. And then you guys maybe get something to eat together, something where you begin to develop those relationships. And if you're both believers or you're kind of on that same path of wanting to be the men that God created you to be, those dads, I think they can just evolve. You don't have to go to step 20 on the first time you hang out with somebody. It's a process.
Yeah, I love that. Again, to reiterate, it's either hobby-based or interest-based or cause-based or interest.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways, but you keep it light. And often dads shoulder by shoulder versus face-to-face. So doing something side by side versus face-to-face. It is kind of intimidating for some dads to sit face-to-face and have a intense conversation. So figure it out, whether it's a campfire or it's throwing a Frisbee on a disc golf course or whatever the thing is. Yeah, take the step.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we look at our wives and the relationships they have, and theirs are face-to-face. I mean, and they're good at it. And so I think sometimes we think, well, I got to do that. And no, that's not our model. God created us different. And I think you're right. The shoulder to shoulder, it works for us as guys. And let that just evolve into the relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. We kind of hit on this just a little bit, but as we go and try to be good dads, sometimes we don't see the fruit. Sometimes we feel like we get frustrated. We don't see results right away. What do you say as far as just to encourage those dads that, and I think that's where sometimes the enemy throws things at us where you're never going to be a good dad. How do you keep fighting the good fight?
Yeah. And I use this concept of doubling down. Like, can we be dads who double down our time investment with our kids? Can we double down on our learning about intentional fatherhood? There's so many resources out there to learn to be a little more intentional around fatherhood or around marriage, other topics. So can we double down on just all areas? And one of the real practical things though is I say, if you're a 2-hour per day dad right now, so think about approximately, it doesn't matter how many, but think about if you're a 2-hour per day dad, that's about how much time you have to connect with your kids. The difference of becoming a 4-hour per day dad versus a 2-hour per day dad. And again, we have 24 hours in the day. There's a lot of hours that we allocate. The difference over the 18 years you have your kids is 13,000 hours of additional time logged, conversations logged, moments made with your kids. So I do think that is one of the just adjusting and calibrating the time dial on again, there's other things you could be doing. You could be golfing. You could be doing these, and golfing's not bad. But
Right.
if you can turn that time intentionality dial, the compounded impact, I think what we need is people, friends, to remind us, voices in our life to remind us, hey, what is my level of intentionality? Because if you put the input in, the output will be you'll have it the rest of your life. Again, these years are short. The rest of your life, you'll have that connection with your kids. You'll have set them on a course. You know, Psalm 78 verse 4 says, we will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of our Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. So it's our job. We have to log time in order to tell and point our kids to God. We set them on a track. You know, I think the Bible also talks about arrows in the hand of a skilled archer, right? Like we're pointing them now. And even though we don't see in the short term, that arrow is not going anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they're not recapping to us back what they've learned because it takes time. But every single person that I've interviewed in their 60s says, I wish I would have invested more time. So if you just turn that one dial of time logged, you will have, the outcomes will be there. The outputs will come.
You know, one thing I've done for myself, and I've talked to a lot of guys about doing, and that's just taking your typical 24-hour day and start make it like a pie chart.
Yeah.
You know, how much time do you sleep? Like mine, I sleep, I get up and have time with the Lord in the morning, go work out. And then my work day, how much time is in there? And then what I have time left. And there's a lot of time left to spend time with Nancy, to spend time when the kids were little or with grandkids now. So that time is there. I think we almost have to be intentional sometimes, because I think anytime somebody says, I don't have time, I think you just need to massage that time a little bit and reprioritize a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. And one of my mentors talks about a treasure hunt, and that what you're doing as a dad when you connect with your kids is you're on a treasure hunt for their heart. And your job, part of your job is to reach into their heart, pull out their purpose and show it to them.
Yeah.
And I love the imagery. I kind of cross metaphors between two different metaphors, but the concept of one-on-one time with your kids. And this is more challenging. Again, if you've got 7 kids, it takes more time to set up all these one-on-ones. But for me and my daughters, we talk about daddy dates, and they know they're coming. They're on the calendar. They know, and they're short. Like my kindergartner, we go to the coffee shop for 20 minutes and we play a board game, and then I take her to school. Like it's a 20-minute every other week. It's not that much. Like it's not actually rocket science at all. But those moments, they know they're coming. It's on the calendar. They get that time in the car with me. They get that moment of knowing that dad loves them. It's all back to the treasure hunt analogy. I am discovering treasures by learning about what makes their heart go and like what makes them come alive. I'm watching their little eyes shine as they help pay for my coffee. I don't even buy them coffee. They buy me coffee with my credit card.
That's great.
But it's so again, I think that's part of you're not seeing the impact, but if you can see their eyes shine, if you can see their eyes shine, and you can discover more things, again, that treasure hunt, you are going to be more consistent and pressing in more and dial that time dial up to being a 4-hour per day dad. And then you'll look back and you will have had 13,000 extra hours of connection. So that's
good.
part of the perspective thing.
Yeah, one of the things I think we can do that I just kind of, and I don't know who suggested to me, but especially when the kids are little and I'm running errands, I'd grab a kid. And I can remember Julie was probably 5 years old, and I had to go to the hardware store, and I needed a washer. I said, help me find a washer. We had washers all over that aisle. And one of the store clerks kept walking by and shaking his head. I said, I promise we'll get them all back in the right thing. But that was probably a 20-minute deal. And then we stopped and got something to drink or something on the way home. Those kind of things are the things that kids remember. And those are the kinds that bond. And so I think there's opportunities there. Just grab a kid when you're going to run an errand. And I get it. Sometimes you just want some peace and quiet. But if a kid's there, try grabbing them instead and just spend that time intentional with them.
Yeah, great tip. Great. You're making a moment that's memorable and that you connect with
those opportunities. Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. So we're talking about being great dads, all those kind of things, but I talk a lot about God first, spouse second, which I encourage couples not to have child-centered marriages.
Yeah.
Being a great dad, being a great husband, why do we need to put our wife and our marriage before our kids?
Oh, it's so massive in an area that I struggle with. I totally struggle with because again, I walk in the door and my daughters are screaming for attention. And a lot of times my wife will leave me like, that's what I need. Go wrestle with them. Okay. So there are seasons that it
Right. You
looks
get a
different.
pass a lot of times, right?
Yeah. It doesn't look like the neat and perfect first 3 minutes are with mom on the porch while the kids wait patiently. It's not in our season of 1-year-old, 3-year-old, 6-year-old. But here's what our girls know. They know, they can sense. We could be in a different room and they can sense, is there unity, is there peace, is there love between the two most important big people in their life. Okay.
Yeah.
When they know that mom and dad love each other, they can tell by the way we embrace, that short kiss, that long hug. Like they can see and they can feel how are mom and dad doing. And so I am absolutely with you on it is Michelle first. She is very much before my three little ladies. And
Yeah.
but I use this analogy. For me, the phrase, I think it's a classic around when you're threatened, you're either fight or flight, right? Fight or flight. Which one are you going to be as a response? But I think both are good, fighting and flight. And here's how I play it out. The fight side is I'm going to fight for my marriage. I'm going to be a dad who is for Michelle, who is pressing in and saying, it doesn't matter how much one of us were hurt or how bad we miscommunicated. We're going to show up. And actually we did this just last week. We went to counseling together, which I am such a huge fan of. If you want to be a great dad, you want to have an awesome marriage, go see a counselor. So we were in counseling last week because we hit some tension points. And actually part of it was around grief of losing my dad and walking through grief. And all of a sudden I'm not the same husband in this last couple months as I was before because of all kinds of different things at play. But I'm going to be a dad who chooses to fight for my marriage, and I'm going to fight for that time, the date night each week. I'm going to fight. So that's one way that my daughters see that I'm putting mom first is I'm a dad who, and they wouldn't use the phrase fight because that actually would have negative connotations, but Michelle knows what I mean when I'm like fight or flight. I'm going to be a dad who fights versus flight is the passive dad who is passive and disengaged. And even though I'm home, my heart is gone. I've taken flight with my heart. So that's one of the ways I think I put marriage first. I get this wrong pretty often, but is I'm going to fight versus flight. But here's the cool thing. If I do fight for my marriage, and if I have the strength and the foundation of a marriage who is not perfect, but we love each other and we pray for each other. Last night we had a moment of prayer at the center of our house are these wood steps. We just prayed over our girls and over our marriage. And that prayer moment was a fight moment. We were fighting for our marriage by praying together. Now what I can do as a dad is I can help my girls take flight. And that's where the fight and flight comes in. I fight for my marriage, have a strength there. That's the first priority. Now I can be a dad. I say flight because I throw my girls up in the air. They're taking flight, but really their lives can soar because they had a dad who fought for the marriage and didn't take flight on the marriage. He can fly his girls. He can bring wonder to their eyes because, and I share that just because visually it helps me. I'm not a dad that takes flight on my marriage. I'm a dad who fights for my marriage, but it allows me to fly my girls.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think the thing that sometimes we have to remember as parents is we are modeling marriage for those kids.
Yeah,
and if you want those three little girls to have a good marriage and they don't see that with you and Michelle, I mean, you've missed a huge opportunity. Their textbook of what it is to be a wife and a mom just kind of went out the window. And so we have those opportunities to model that and to take the time to do that. So I got a question for you. So if I ask Michelle how you put her first, what would she tell me?
Oh, great question. And I mean, one of the first things that I mentioned already is she would say, me taking the vulnerable step of going to counseling with her was a way that I put her first, because I said, I'm going to take my heart and expose some of the hurts and some of the things I'm feeling that it's hard for me to share sometimes. So that'd be one of the things she would say by taking her on dates, is a way that I put her first and value our marriage. We use Voxer. So the app on your smartphone, it's funny, but it lets her hear my tone versus texting. And throughout the day, once in a while, I'll close the office, my door. If I'm on the way to a meeting, I'll send her a Voxer message on my phone, just so she can, again, there's not always time to talk during the day because the girls different things are happening, but those ways of connecting with her heart, she would say are ways that I put her first.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. This has really been a great conversation. As we kind of end this, what are you enjoying about your marriage right now?
Probably Probably the thing that's making me kind of that back to that, my eyes glow with passion, is this is probably the strongest in our 13 and a half years, the moment in time right now that we are as a team, that Michelle and I are teammates, and I'm actually not even thinking on the home front. The first time that we're on mission as a team in the area of ministry. So she leads the ministry of Dad Awesome with me. She is Mom Awesome, and she brings she brings so much to that ministry. The two of us are leading a ministry called Freedom on inner healing and that Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 stuff of like God wants to do a work on that baggage in our life. So we lead that ministry together at church. And then she also is a leader in our kids ministry where I'm the kids pastor. So the three areas, fatherhood, freedom, and family ministry, she's leading with me in all three of those areas right now. And that is, to me, I feel like there's more joy and more, our prayer life is united. And I just feel like that's put us on purpose in a direction that I'm just so grateful for. So that's probably the thing I'm most excited about right now in our marriage.
That's so good. That's just the fact that you guys can do that together, and she's involved in a dad's ministry is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It really is. So if people want to connect with you, what's the best place and way for them to find you?
Oh, thanks for asking. So Dad Awesome is the name of the ministry. It's just dadawesome.org. So we love awesome marriage. It's like you got awesome marriage, awesome dads. They're all one. So we love your ministry as well. But yeah, we've got the weekly podcast, and then we got the Fathers for the Fatherless bike ride and other resources, some small group curriculum and a daily text message. So it's all though at dadawesome.org.
Okay, and we'll put all that in the show notes. Jeff, it's been great to talk to you. It's great becoming friends with you, and love what you guys are doing with Dad Awesome. We're all in this together to help men and parents, families, all to do more of take our marriages, our parenting, being good husbands, all that to a new level. And certainly what you guys are doing at Dad Awesome plays a big part in that. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much. I love the conversation. Take care.